He had 6 wives, changed religion, and exploded after death. King Henry VIII of England, a towering figure of the 16th century, ruled with an iron fist, reshaping the nation's faith, beheading wives, and amassing power through sheer will. Yet, his death in 1547 brought a grotesque end. His bloated, diseased body reportedly burst open during his funeral procession, leaking decay and horrifying onlookers. This was the final act of a monarch whose life was a whirlwind of glory and ruin, a man who controlled England but lost control of his own flesh. Join me as we unravel the contradictions of Henry VIII's reign and the grim symbolism of his explosive demise. In the early 16th century, England stood at a crossroads of power, faith, and upheaval. A kingdom navigating the dawn of the Renaissance while clinging to medieval traditions. This was the world of King Henry VIII, who ruled from 1509 to 1547, a monarch whose reign transformed England from a Catholic stronghold into a Protestant nation, reshaping its politics, religion, and society. The era was marked by the clash of old feudal loyalties and emerging national identity, set against a Europe roiled by religious reform, dynastic wars, and the looming threat of the Ottoman Empire. Henry's England, rich in wool trade and ambition, was a stage for his larger-than-life rule and his infamous gruesome end. England in 1509 was a prosperous but volatile realm. The Wars of the Roses, a 30-year civil conflict between noble houses, had ended in 1485 with Henry VII, Henry VIII's father, founding the Tudor dynasty. The population of about 2.5 million lived mostly in rural villages, with London, a bustling hub of 50,000, driving trade in wool and cloth to the Low Countries. Life was hierarchical. Nobles and clergy held vast estates, while peasants worked the land, their lives tied to seasons and church bells. The Catholic Church dominated, its monasteries owning a third of England's land, and its rituals, masses, saints' days, shaped daily existence. Yet, whispers of reform, inspired by Martin Luther's 1517 Theses, began challenging Rome's grip, stirring tensions across Europe. The broader world was in flux. The Renaissance brought new ideas, humanism, art, and exploration, with figures like Erasmus and Columbus reshaping thought and geography. Spain and France, England's rivals, vied for dominance, their armies clashing in Italy while the Ottomans pressed into Eastern Europe. England, a second-tier power, relied on diplomacy and marriage alliances to punch above its weight. Henry VII's frugal rule left a full treasury, but the nobility, barons and earls, remained a threat, their private armies a reminder of past civil wars. Superstition ran deep, omens were read in comets, and disease like the sweating sickness could kill thousands overnight. Henry VIII inherited this world at 17, a young king whose charisma and ambition promised a golden age. The Tudor court was a dazzling arena of jousts, feasts, and intrigue, where loyalty to the crown was rewarded with titles, but dissent meant death. The king's divine right was unquestioned, yet his need for a male heir drove his most seismic acts, breaking with Rome, dissolving monasteries, and marrying 6 times. This was an era where a king's personal desires could reshape a nation, but also where excess and tyranny could lead to a gruesome legacy, as Henry's decaying body would prove at his death. King Henry VIII of England was a colossal figure of the 16th century, a monarch whose charisma, ambition, and excesses reshaped a nation and left a legacy of power intertwined with personal decay. Born in 1491, Henry ascended the throne in 1509 at age 17, a handsome, athletic prince whose early reign promised a golden age of Renaissance splendor. Yet, by his death in 1547, he was a bloated, tyrannical ruler, his body ravaged by disease and his soul burdened by scandals, a man who broke with Rome, executed wives, and exploded literally at his own funeral. Henry's life was a tapestry of contradictions. A scholar king who authored books on theology, a warrior who dreamed of crusades, and a despot whose quest for a male heir unleashed religious upheaval. Henry was a commanding presence, tall at 6'2" with auburn hair and a booming voice that filled halls with laughter or fury. In his youth, he was the epitome of Renaissance manhood, jousting champion, composer of music like Pastime with Good Company, and fluent in Latin, French, and Italian. His court was a glittering arena of art and intellect, attracting talents like Thomas More and Hans Holbein. But Henry's world was the Tudor court, a nest of intrigue where loyalty was rewarded with titles and disfavor meant the axe. As second son of Henry VII, he was groomed for the church until his brother Arthur's death in 1502 thrust him into heirship, marrying Arthur's widow, Catherine of Aragon, in 1509. His reign began with promise. England was prosperous, its wool trade enriching merchants, and Henry's alliance with Spain through Catherine bolstered his position. He fancied himself a defender of faith, penning Assertio Septem Sacramentorum in 1521 against Martin Luther, earning the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope. Yet Henry's personal struggles defined him. His obsession with a male heir, Catherine bore only one surviving daughter, Mary, led to his infamous break with Rome. In 1533, he annulled his marriage, marrying Anne Boleyn, triggering the English Reformation. He dissolved monasteries, seizing their wealth to fund wars and court, transforming England from Catholic to Protestant. Henry's 6 marriages were a saga of love, politics, and tragedy. Catherine's devotion clashed with his desire for sons. Anne's wit ended in beheading on trumped-up charges. Jane Seymour died giving birth to Edward VI. Anne of Cleves was divorced for lack of attraction. Catherine Howard executed for adultery, and Catherine Parr survived him, a stabilizing force. His court was a battlefield. Advisors like Thomas Wolsey and Thomas Cromwell rose and fell, executed when they failed him. Henry's health deteriorated from a 1528 jousting injury, leading to ulcers, obesity, and gout. By 1540s, he weighed over 300 pounds, needing mechanical lifts to mount horses. Henry's contradictions were stark: a king who patronized arts but burned heretics, who sought divine right but defied the Pope. His 1547 death from sepsis left England divided. Protestant under Edward, then Catholic under Mary, Protestant again under Elizabeth. His funeral explosion, his coffin reportedly bursting from gases, symbolized his reign's decay. Henry was a visionary who birthed the Church of England and Navy, but a tyrant whose paranoia claimed thousands. His legacy endures in England's institutions, a prince whose power masked a man crumbling from within. In the early hours of January 28, 1547, King Henry VIII of England drew his last breath in Whitehall Palace. His once mighty body ravaged by years of excess and disease, marking the end of a 38-year reign that had redefined the nation. But the true turning point came during his funeral procession on February 16th, when his bloated corpse reportedly exploded inside the coffin, leaking putrid fluids, and horrifying onlookers. A grotesque spectacle that symbolized the decay of his rule and the turbulent transition to his son Edward VI's era. This macabre event, whether legend or fact, encapsulated the contradictions of Henry's life. A king who wielded absolute power in life but lost control even in death. Henry's final years were a slow unraveling. By 1546, at 55, he was a shadow of the athletic youth who jousted and danced. A 1536 jousting accident left him with chronic leg ulcers, likely from osteomyelitis, causing constant pain and infection. His weight ballooned to over 300 pounds from gluttonous feasts, swans, peacocks, and endless wine, exacerbating gout and possible type 2 diabetes. Syphilis rumors swirled, though unproven, explaining his paranoia and failed pregnancies. His court, once vibrant, became a den of fear. He executed advisors like Thomas Cromwell and wives like Catherine Howard, his temper flaring in fits of rage. The Reformation he ignited, breaking with Rome in 1533 to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, had enriched the crown through monastery dissolutions, but divided England between Catholics and Protestants. Henry's death was agonized and isolated. Surrounded by courtiers like Thomas Cranmer, he whispered confessions, regretting his sins but affirming his Protestant faith. No family attended. His son, Edward VI, was 9, daughters Mary and Elizabeth distant. His will named Edward heir, with a regency council, but factions maneuvered for power. The body, embalmed with spices and lead-wrapped, lay in state for days, swelling from gases and fluids despite efforts. The funeral procession to Windsor Castle was lavish, 2,000 mourners, a wax effigy atop the coffin, but disaster struck at Sion House. According to chronicler William Seymour, the coffin burst, leaking putrid matter that dogs licked, fulfilling a prophecy from Friar William Peto that dogs would lick his blood like Ahab's. This incident, if true, debated by historians as possibly exaggerated propaganda, shifted England's trajectory. It horrified the superstitious, seen as divine judgment on a tyrannical king. Edward VI's reign, guided by Protestant regents, accelerated the Reformation, burning Catholic relics and enforcing English prayer books. Mary's Catholic restoration in 1553 and Elizabeth's 1558 settlement followed, the Tudor dynasty enduring but scarred by Henry's divisions. The explosion symbolized Henry's contradictions, powerful in life, rotten in death, fueling rumors that amplified his villainy. The fallout was cultural. Pamphlets spread the tale, blending with Henry's scandals to paint him as a monster, influencing Shakespeare's portrayals and modern media like the Tudors. It highlighted Tudor burial practices, embalming failures common in obese bodies, and medical ignorance. Henry's outcome was a mixed legacy, architect of England's navy, church, and modern state, but a tyrant whose personal decay mirrored his realm's turmoil. The funeral explosion, literal or legendary, was the pivot from his iron rule to a new era, a king whose body betrayed him as he had betrayed so many. The death of King Henry VIII in January 1547, followed by the shocking explosion of his bloated corpse during his funeral procession, marked the end of a reign that transformed England, but left a legacy as divided as the man himself. His 38-year rule reshaped religion, governance, and the monarchy, creating the Church of England and laying the foundations for a modern state. Yet his tyranny and personal excesses, 6 marriages, thousands executed, and a decaying body, cast a shadow of infamy. Recognized as a titan of English history, Henry's story has been both celebrated and erased, his achievements overshadowed by scandal and the grotesque symbolism of his funeral, a fitting end for a king who ruled through power and lost control in death. The immediate outcome of Henry's death was a fragile England. His 9-year-old son, Edward VI, inherited the throne under a Protestant regency council, pushing the Reformation further with English prayer books and stripped churches. This sparked tensions that erupted under Mary IV's Catholic restoration in 1553, followed by Elizabeth I's Protestant settlement in 1558. Henry's break with Rome, driven by his annulment of Catherine of Aragon's marriage, enriched the crown with 1.3 million from dissolved monasteries but fractured society, 70,000 executions, including nobles, clergy, and 2 wives, left scars. Recognition of Henry is undeniable in England. His creation of the Church of England endures, with the monarch still its supreme governor. Portraits by Hans Holbein immortalize his imposing figure, and his reign is a staple in history curricula, celebrated for birthing the Tudor Golden Age under Elizabeth. Shakespeare's Henry VIII, 1613, portrays him as a flawed but majestic ruler, and modern media like The Tudors, 2007, keep his saga alive, focusing on his marriages and charisma. In popular culture, he's a symbol of absolute power. His 6 wives, from Catherine's piety to Anne Boleyn's beheading, are legendary, with songs like "I'm Henry VIII, I Am" embedding him in folklore. Yet, erasure taints his legacy. The funeral explosion, reported by chronicler William Seymour, may be exaggerated. Modern historians like Alison Weir suggest it was Catholic propaganda to tarnish a Protestant king, but it cemented Henry's image as a grotesque tyrant. His physical decay, obese, ulcer-ridden, possibly diabetic, mirrors the moral decay critics ascribe to his court, where paranoia led to executions of advisors like Thomas Cromwell and cousins like Margaret Pole. Women, beyond his wives, are largely erased. Figures like his sister Margaret Tudor, who shaped Scotland's dynasty, or court women who navigated his wrath, are footnotes. Catholic narratives vilified him as a heretic, while Protestant ones downplayed his violence to emphasize reform. Globally, Henry's impact was mixed. His defiance of the Pope inspired Protestant movements in Europe, but his isolationist wars weakened England's continental influence compared to Spain or France. Artifacts of his reign, Hampton Court Palace, his armor, the Mary Rose wreck, recovered in 1982, are preserved, but many records were lost in fires or purges. Today, historians like David Starkey debate his genius versus cruelty, while tourism capitalizes on his infamy, with 500,000 visitors annually to Hampton Court. Yet his darker acts, burning heretics, executing 2% of England's population, are often glossed over in favor of his charisma. Henry's outcome reshaped history, but his erasure lies in the oversimplification of his reign. He was a scholar who wrote theology, a warrior who dreamed of crusades, yet a king whose gluttony and paranoia undid his grandeur. The funeral explosion, whether fact or myth, symbolizes a reign that burst its bounds, powerful, chaotic, and rotting from within. As one chronicler wrote, his body broke as his kingdom trembled. Henry's story challenges us to see beyond the legend, to recognize a man whose ambition built a nation but whose decay left it teetering. King Henry VIII's life was a whirlwind of power and decay, a monarch who wielded absolute authority to reshape England's religion, laws, and destiny, only to succumb to the frailties of his own body in a grotesquely symbolic end. From his youthful charisma and 6 tumultuous marriages to the Reformation's upheaval and his funeral explosion, Henry's reign embodied contradictions, innovation amid tyranny, glory shadowed by rot. He broke with Rome to secure a male heir, dissolved monasteries to fill his coffers, and executed thousands to silence dissent, leaving a legacy that birthed the modern English state, but at the cost of untold suffering. This story compels us to reflect on the perils of unchecked power, where a king's desires can forge nations or fracture them. Henry's bloated corpse bursting at his funeral serves as a macabre metaphor for a rule that swelled with ambition but burst under its own weight. In a world still grappling with leaders who bend history to personal whims, Henry reminds us of the human cost behind crowns. As one chronicler wrote, his heart was stout, but his flesh weak. Let Henry's tale warn us to seek balance in power, honoring the progress he wrought while remembering the decay it concealed. Jean-Jacques Dessalines' journey from enslaved laborer to emperor of Haiti embodies the raw power of revolution, a man who shattered colonial chains, declared the first Black Republic, and defied empires only to be felled by betrayal within 2 years. His rise as a fearless general in the Haitian Revolution, leading slaves to victory against Napoleon's armies, was a beacon of hope for the oppressed worldwide. Yet, his downfall, marked by political intrigue, racial divisions, and his own harsh rule, reveals the fragile line between liberation and tyranny, where ambition can unite a people or tear them apart. Assassinated in 1806, his empire vanished, but the revolution he ignited reshaped history. This story compels us to confront a hard truth. History often erases those who challenge the status quo, reducing complex figures like Dessalines to footnotes in Western textbooks while celebrating their oppressors. His legacy, though obscured by narratives of violence, endures as a symbol of unyielding liberation, inspiring movements from abolition to decolonization. In a world still grappling with inequality, Dessalines reminds us that true freedom demands not just victory, but unity and justice. As he declared in Haiti's independence proclamation, "We have dared to be free. Let us be thus by ourselves and for ourselves." Let his courage urge us to honor the forgotten revolutionaries, fighting for a world where no one is left in chains.